our unit on incorporation of folk songs into post-tonal compositions. And we have Professor Vedrana Subotic back with us again today to talk more about the D grant-sponsored project arranging these Yugoslavian folk songs, or former Yugoslavian folk songs.
That's right.
And then for the rest of the week, we're going to be talking about something that's related, another way of incorporating pre-existing materials into compositions called neoclassicism. So this is related to some of the borrowings and quotations that we talked about last week, but it's got its own spin on it, which we'll be talking about in class on Wednesday and Friday. So in addition to the two folk songs that we talked about last Monday, we have two other transcriptions to talk about today, and I'm embarrassed enough about my language skills that I'm not even going to try to pronounce the titles of these. Is this the one that you'd like to start with?
Sure.
Or, okay.
Yeah, this is great. So this is called Macedonian Girl, or Macedonska Devojka, and it's a traditional Macedonian song that is set syllabically to the odd rhythms that add up to, in this case, in this particular piece, it's a 7 rhythmic unit, so as you can see, 3 plus 4, but of course there are many intricacies with rhythmic counterpoint in this particular song, which is kind of a driving identity for Macedonian folk music. We had a Macedonian pianist here in collaboration with the Kingsbury Virtuoso series in January, and he actually demonstrated some of Macedonian folk music just for fun at his concert, and was saying that Macedonian music goes up to 12/16ths in combinations, just really weird, kind of odd combos of notes. So what I wanted to start with, the melody is repetitive with a chorus that comes back that I will show you in a second, but at the very, very beginning, what is interesting, this introduction, which I will play for you. Second line 72. So those are the three main components of this song, and going back to the beginning, to the first page, is where you start getting sort of a sense of the intricacy, because if we leave out the first note, the B, and then just count from the counterpoint, which I would qualify as the intervals that you see that are included in that single line, you have 5 notes, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, incredibly varied rhythmic layout, and what happens as we go on, so like if I start with the counterpoint in the left hand, you can see that the notes are laid out, the harmony is laid out so that it's on every second note of the bar, which is already an odd meter. So we have, and this goes on until measure 15, where it's switched quickly by holding the F for 3, where are we now? Let's see, measure 15. Yeah, right here. So we have the 2 tied over, so everything is in 2s. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and here it quickly switches to 3, and then at some point right here it's reset. Here's another 3 from measure 18 to 19, and then here it's quickly reset into 1 for a different harmony. So the bass notes, the ones that are tied, are the lowest in the, if you think of it as an abacus, a set of staff lines. These notes are basically the fundamental base of the melody. And the other interesting thing about it is that even though the key signature appears to be E minor, it does not start in E minor, right? So it's starting in a sort of a modal version of an A minor harmonic scale, right? So at the very onset, you have this F sharp hanging in the key signature, but what it begins with is an F natural, right? Which throws it off immediately in terms of, wait, what key are we in, right? So,
actually, if it's okay for me to interject.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to do as a discussion exercise, listening to the first couple systems of this, what strikes you as the tonal center of the beginning of this arrangement? And can you justify why your pitch functions as the tonal center? This is a question that many of you will need to be thinking about in your final papers. In fact, if you're dealing with a piece that has a tonal center, probably you can figure that one of your body paragraphs will talk about that. So part of my goal in these last couple of weeks is to help you review concepts from early in the semester that you're going to be writing about. So would you mind playing the first couple systems of this again with this question in mind? I think that's good, yeah. So what's your impression? What would you say sounds like the tonal center here? Or do you want to argue that there is no tonal center? Yeah, sure.
Well, at the very, very beginning, it almost sounds like C major.
Interesting.
Going down in steps, but then you get into kind of like what you said, this kind of like harmonic A minor. Yeah, when the left hand comes in, it kind of reveals that, I think.
Mm-hmm. So is it just the fact that we have this unique pitch class set, the A harmonic minor referential collection, and your tonal ears are used to hearing A as the center of that collection? Like you're so used to a particular mode of that scale that you're like, oh, that's the center? Or is there something in the way that those pitches are being used that points to A as the center for your ear?
I think it's a combination of just my knowledge of tonality, but also just the repetitiveness of how much this kind of modal feature comes back.
When you can you be more? I don't quite understand what you mean by like this kind of modal feature.
Well, this pitch class set is just prolonged for so much of the duration of the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
that it's kind of ingrained in a way, I guess you can put it.
All right.
Are you talking about this?
Yeah. It's just held for a long time.
Interestingly, that little ostinato doesn't even include the pitch A, right? The thing that we hear at the beginning. And so this is a strategy that we've seen some composers use, is set up a deliberate ambiguity of tonal center, actually withholding the note that they're going to deploy as the tonic of the piece until later on. But Stella's been raising her hand, so let me come back to
Well,
her.
so I would say with pitch center, it's most important kind of how it sounds, and then maybe you can go and back it up with like why. So I haven't like counted obviously, but I think that it's either D or F, just because there's so many of them, and like although there's chords and there's other things going on, that's always kind of the thing in the middle, at the center, at least. So I think if you kind of count it, and then maybe it's D because it starts that way, it would probably be D or F.
And so even though like we can't disagree about what the overall referential collection is, the two of you are disagreeing about what strikes you as the center. And if we treat A as the center, then it's just A harmonic minor, easy to label. If we took D as the proposal, can you figure out what we would call the mode of harmonic minor, the mode of A harmonic minor that starts on D?
Well, it would be the fourth mode of harmonic minor.
Okay, it would be the fourth mode of harmonic minor. You could also think of it as like Dorian sharp 4, which I've heard called Ukrainian Dorian before. I don't know if that's like a justified term. I know nothing about Ukrainian music. But again, just recalling my video lectures from when we had a week on scales, two important ways of labeling modes of collections. Something like the fourth mode of harmonic minor, or relating it to one of the Greek modes with some sort of chromatic inflection. So like Dorian sharp 4. Exactly. And so starting on D as a way of showing that maybe we think of that as a center. All right, so we've got 2 votes so far. Yeah, Dallas.
I was gonna say E.
E, okay, I love it. And so can you justify E?
This is getting exciting.
It just feels like it's like banging me over the head with the E. At least, like to me, that's what stands out. It's like this drone just like constantly ringing. Which you could say about the D and the F because they get repeated a lot too. But I don't know. For whatever reason, I guess the E stands out to me.
Okay, so I actually share both of your intuitions, but I feel like saying E, like I'm being banged over the head with E, wouldn't fly in an academic paper.
Yeah,
So could
I
we?
mean, I guess it starts most of the 4/16 figures and some of the 3, which I guess the D starts some of the 3s as well, but I don't think it ever starts the 4 groupings.
So yeah, this is one thing that really strikes me as part of the rhythmic cycle is like this middle point in the measure very consistently is an E. So that's something that I can ground my listening to, even though I find this kind of metrical cycle kind of hard to orient towards as somebody who's used to more classical conceptions of meter. And sorry for hijacking the middle of your presentation, but to go back to that, one term that I do want to introduce is the term additive meter. Classical conceptions of metrical structure are based on division. You take the whole measure and then you divide it into 3s or into 2s. But certain musical styles, probably most famously musical styles from the region of the Balkans, don't work by dividing symmetrically one longer time span, but instead they work by starting from some small metrical unit, here a 16th note, and then adding unusual groupings of them together. So 3s plus 4s to give us some sort of, well, here we have 3 plus 4, 16. A lot of people would just notate 7, 16. And so when Dr. Subotic said that this can go up to like 12, 16, I'm willing to bet that 12, 16 would not be divisible into like 4 3s like normal 12, 16 in classical music would do. It would probably be something like 2 plus 3 plus 2 plus 3 plus 2, some irregular asymmetrical. So additive meter is the standard 20th century or post-tonal term for that kind of structure. but that's a little bit of a tangent where we were talking about. So Dallas, you're saying that to orient to the additive meter, that regular recurrence of E within the cycle helps.
Yeah.
Another thing that strikes me is mostly this line that we hear at the beginning is just a single pitch, one note at a time, but there are a couple of dyads that happen, right? So we've got this for CE dyad, this BD, this AE. And it's not entirely consistent, but it strikes me that the note that occurs the most often as part of a dyad is an E, right? So E is part of this dyad, one yes, one no, two yes, two no, three yes, right? So E is the one that's coming up in roughly half of the dyads, whereas the other notes don't seem to occur so often. So the notes in this dyad right here, B and D, when's the next dyad that didn't include an E? Well, it's this one right here, and that's G sharp and F. So the notes that are the note that's getting emphasized by occurring in verticalities is again E. So I think that's another way in which the piece seems to be emphasizing that pitch. And so if we were to think of a harmonic minor with E as the center, how would we label that?
Maybe Phrygian dominant.
Okay, awesome. So this particular mode of harmonic minor is one that has a very common name, Phrygian dominant. I'd also mention that Phrygian dominant is really closely related to the double harmonic minor scale, or double harmonic major, sorry, which came up in last week. We could also call this the fifth mode of harmonic minor. We could also call it Phrygian sharp 3. But Phrygian dominant is the one that everybody uses because that's a pretty well recognized term. So having talked about what we think the pitch center is at the beginning, I'd like to move back to where the actual melody comes in, and then if possible, I'd also like to listen to the end of the piece. Because often the end of a piece is where a composer reveals what they think the pitch center has been all along, if there's been any ambiguity.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
So maybe for 47 or?
yeah, sounds perfect. So does that complicate your sense of the pitch center? Do you feel like that gives evidence in favor of one or another?
Yeah, I'm actually going to change my mind and say it's E. They're actually kind of at the beginning, it sounds almost like a phrase model, like a classic phrase model, which wasn't clear at all at the beginning. But it's like kind of a 1, 4, 5, 1 feeling a little bit, but it's not like on the first beat of every bar, but the pitches are present.
So what Sherrill is talking about is if you pay attention to these notes, E, A, B, E, that feels like that's articulating a 1, 4, 5, 1. And kind of whatever a composer put on top of that, like they could harmonize those bass notes with almost anything in a post-tonal style, just recognizing that 1, 4, 5, 1 pattern in the bass line it's such a common pattern that listeners are prepared to recognize that you could harmonize it with weird cluster chords and you could still get some kind of effect of that sort of phrase model. So yeah, I think this passage gravitates much more strongly towards E than the beginning clearly did. Is there any other evidence that we could point to in support of E as a center here? Yeah.
I guess to bounce off of that, in a smaller scale, you have these constant 4/1 motions, or 5/1. Leading up the fourth to E, right before the E in the left hand occurs.
So you're talking about this sort of bass motion right
Yes.
here, which again feels like it's really playing on like classical harmonic principles. Yeah. It's probably worth mentioning that here we aren't using exactly the same collection as we did before. Notice that now we've got G naturals and F sharps, which reinforce the notated key signature, which has been suggesting E minor all along. But I also want to point out that we do start to throw in accidentals. For example, in measure 49, we've got some D sharps, which feel like they're actually trying to create functional leading tones, leading into, which plays into Stella's point. But the piece hasn't forgotten where it started, and if we look at the last two measures of this page, second to last measure of the page, we've resolved back to E, and we do basically a complete E natural minor scale right here. But while the bass sustains E as we stay in the same harmony, we actually flip over to another collection. And what's this collection? Well, it's actually the one that we started the piece with. We've got F naturals and G sharps now, which would be going back to E frigid dominant. And this kind of compositional resource is something that strikes me as maybe coming out of jazz chord scale thinking. The idea that you could take some root note, some basic chord, and you've got one scale that you could plug into that, like this E minor, E natural minor scale right here, or you can plug in a completely different scale on top of that. And just by changing the scale that you built on top of a root, you get a different sound world, you get some different kind of quality. That's a compositional practice that, as far as I know, really was invented in jazz, and now even people who are working in more of a classical environment do that sort of thing. We've seen composers like Bartók use scales to define different formal sections, but the idea of just plugging in a different scale over a single chord, I'm not sure that there are classical precedents for it before jazz. All right, so just to sort of finish the story about the tonal center here, maybe we could turn to somewhere near the end. I don't know where you feel comfortable jumping in, but
Anywhere.
how about at the double bar at 151, right here? We would do like a fade out, but yeah. So what's your sense of what's going on here? I see you raising your hand, Jordan, but you've already given me a lot today. I wanna see if anybody else wants to chime in. Or I'll phrase that less passive aggressively. I want somebody else to chime in.
Do you want me to play it again? You can listen to
No,
it.
I think we're just shy and we don't need another hearing to hide behind.
I think I still hear, well, I guess not still, because it kind of switches. But I think I hear this as like E minor again, and the right hand is very reminiscent of the beginning. It's like moved
Okay, yeah, so this is something that I really love about this, is I feel like the tonal center kind of moves towards a place of clarity as the arrangement goes on. We start in this place where it's very ambiguous, and I think we all made actually very good justifications for what we think the center is at the beginning, and there are many possibilities. But by the end, to me, it really feels like it settles down into E minor. And it settles into an E minor that feels clearer and like more consonant than some of the stuff that we've heard earlier on. And I think what you're saying about the way that that ostinato at the beginning is transposed up creates a big part of that. Like, it feels not only like a return, but it feels like the return has been changed somehow. And so you say that the ostinato really feels like it emphasizes G. And I forget, yeah, you're the one who suggested that the ostinato at the beginning emphasized E, right? So you're being very consistent in your ear and saying it's kind of it's the middle note of this little trichord. It's the one that recurs in the 4-note groupings that feels like it's coming out. And we can think of the F sharp and the A as being like neighbor tones to it or something. And what that does in my ear is, first of all, it emphasizes a kind of dissonant consonance. It's a consonance because we're just sustaining the third of the chord, and it doesn't really ever feel like it has to move anywhere. It's kind of interesting to have this third of the chord on the top, kind of just sustaining until the end of the piece. To me, that feels like that is very much in the spirit of the like fade out, kind of repeating multiple times. This is not a piece that like cadences and then is done. We just sort of reach this clarity of E minor as the tonic and sit there for a while until it dissipates. But I say dissonant consonants because that G is always combined with those neighbor tones, and the neighbor tones never really go away either. They're just always sort of there, adding a little bit of buzz to the E minor sound world. And on the downbeats, a lot of the time, we are hearing those neighbor tones, like F sharp, clashing against the tonic. So I guess here's a good example. We hear this F sharp against the E, which we have as the tonic. And then here, because of the way the rhythm of the left hand works out, we actually hear F sharp and F sharp at the same time. But then we get the E, just a 16th note later. So we just kind of like live in this state of suspended dissonance as kind of the tonality at which the piece ends. But because we started with a less consonant collection overall, sort of resolving to E natural minor as our consonant ending can still feel like a motion towards brightness or like a motion towards clarity to end the piece. And I'm harping on this a little bit because this is a technique that's going to resonate with the pieces that we talk about for the rest of the week. This idea of taking a consonant triad and just adding some dissonances to it and saying, you live here now, you're good, don't feel like you have to go anywhere. That's characteristic of the neoclassical works we'll talk about later on this week. All right, so sorry for getting a little bit ahead of myself with all of that.
I just want to make sure you have enough time for your
Yes.
analysis. So.
Well, this is a lot of the analysis that I wanted to do.
Okay.
We have one other arrangement to talk about, but I should hand this back over to you. Was there anything else that you wanted to highlight in this
No, I
passage?
think that covers a lot of it, and yeah, thank you for highlighting some of those
So,
intricacies.
how about we switch over to our second piece for today?
Mujo Kuye, which is so Mujo is a name, Bosnian name, and it's sort of an equivalent to like something that would be a very common name in any culture, like John, or Mike. So Mujo could be Mike. And this is falls in the category of the Bosnian Sevdalika, like the Kadja Podjukna Bambash, which I played for you last week, the first one. And just to remind you, the origin of the word from Arabic, savda, for sorrow or blackness. So they're inherently kind of sad, melancholy songs, and they typically deal with the subject of love and loss. What's interesting about this, in comparison, specifically in comparison to what we heard last week and the Macedonian Girl, is that unlike Kavya Project Nabimbashi, which is a strophic sort of melody with accompaniment, and then Jelen Jelen, the Romani anthem, was originally an a cappella. We compare it to something like from African American spirituals like The Amazing Grace, where you don't really have the accompaniment that was later added. And then we have Macedonian Girl, which is largely based on this syllabic approach to lyrics and the odd meters or the additive meters. And then Muya Puya is a sort of a melismatic exercise over what appears to be almost a single chord, which is this with a raised, what in classical canon maybe compared to a flat six, maybe, if that makes sense. So, there's plenty of pieces like Beethoven's Sonata. Brahms used it a lot, so it's certainly an interesting idea that has survived in popular music as well. Very often with popular songs, what we will hear is the whole tonality will just shift up a half step and we'll start over again, and it gives it sort of this brightness that was previously unheard. But in this case, this half step that occurs constantly between F and G flat is intended to create this resonance of pain and melancholy and this sabda, the feeling of sadness. So I'm going to play some of this for you. It's, like I said, highly melismatic, meaning that it comes out of probably the prayer tradition of the Islam world. In Bosnia, like in other Islamic regions, although Bosnia is no longer necessarily Islamic, but it was for 500 years while under the occupation of the Ottoman Empire. It was typical to have these prayers during the day, during which Muezzin, who was a priest / cantor in the Islamic tradition, would come out into the tower that is called minaret, that is attached to the Muslim churches, would come out and sing the prayer. So the story here is also interesting as well. Well, Macedonian Girl is very much about celebrating the superiority of Macedonian beauty. This song is a dialogue between Muyo and his mother. So there are two characters in this, which strikes me as sort of Schubertian. And they are singing to each other. The mother is, she starts out the song and she's basically saying, Muyo, what are you doing? Why are you out in the courtyard shoeing your horse? It's dark, it's a dark night, there's barely any moonlight, and you're trying to shoe a horse. What's wrong with you? And he said, leave me alone, mother, just let me be. I'm going to shoe my horse, please go away. So the mother goes away, but she can't let it go, so she comes out again, and she says, Muyo, my son. So she becomes more and more impassioned and sort of pleading with him to tell her why he is out here in the middle of the night, in dim moonlight, shoeing his horse again. And so at some point he breaks down and he says, I have to do something, because otherwise I will suffer this deep sorrow over my beloved, and so I'm shoeing my horse to kind of make myself forget thinking about her. And at some point in the narrative, which is unlike Kadja Bozirno Bembashu, and unlike Jelim Jelim, and really unlike Makedon Skudevic, there is a kind of a climax to the story where he just sort of breaks down, and in the vocal rendition of this, it's very impressive. It's sort of operatic with how the singer handles the melismas and the improvisation in kind of communicating this heightened state of distress. So it starts out as it was envisioned by Christopher O'Reilly as a pavan. So these weird Cyrillic words that you see there, a pavan, like the pavan. Yes. And this was also incidentally my father's favorite folk song, so it's dedicated to my dad. That's the rest of the Cyrillics there. Anyway, it starts out like this.
Okay, that's why I was getting a little
So
confused.
just go forward to measure 84.
Okay.
Oh, there we are, yeah, the bottom line. There it is. So I cut out a few measures because of the improvisatory nature. I felt that there were some repetitions of redundancies in the way it was arranged, so to avoid too much the same material. I cut a section, which is where we stopped and forwarded.
So there's so many sounds in this arrangement. There's some clear jazz influence again. There's some like really Bartokian dissonance planing. We're a popular room today.
Looking for practice space,
yeah.
I'm sure.
But since we only have 2 minutes left, the question I want to focus on is throughout this arrangement, we've heard a lot of emphasis on one particular scale. Using F as the center, you can see that we resolved to F as the last part of the piece. And this last system that we're seeing on the page uses the scale that's been really emphasized throughout. Somebody that, the one with the really distinctive G flat that we've already talked about. But if you think about this as an entire scale, somebody that I haven't yet heard from today, so this means no Stella, no Dallas, no Jordan, how would you label the scale that's really being used in this arrangement? F, G flat A, B flat C, D flat, E flat.
I help them.
If that gives you a hint. So one way to think about this is there's a lot of flats, right? If we're thinking of F as the center, we've got like a G flat. G flat would be flat 2. That puts us in the realm of what diatonic mode? Which is the diatonic mode defined by? What's that, Lydia? Yeah, Phrygian. So this feels like it should be in dialogue with F Phrygian somehow. But there's one note that doesn't belong to F Phrygian, which is the note in this scale that's kind of unusual from a Phrygian perspective. A natural. So what kind of scale do you get when you've got Phrygian but with a major third? Well, if we don't have a familiar name for it, we could just call it Phrygian raised 3 or Phrygian sharp 3. But one of the reasons I had to exclude Dallas from naming this is because Dallas has already told us the name for this mode. This is Phrygian dominant. So if you've got a Phrygian scale but with a major tonic triad, that's the Phrygian dominant scale. So actually this is a scale that's really, really popular across the world, and it's not a coincidence that we've heard it in both of the pieces that we've talked about today. It's, I don't know that it's the most important non-diatonic scale, but it's certainly one of a handful of the most important non-diatonic scales. All right, and that's unfortunately all the time that we have for today. Let's thank Professor Subotic another time. And like I said, we'll be talking about neoclassicism on Wednesday and Friday. Please do bring your anthologies for Wednesday, because we're going to be talking a piece out of it then. All right, thanks, folks. I'll see you on Wednesday. No, it's perfect. I mean, I have them every day, so I can talk about whatever you say. Yeah. We don't think so. We have only, 50 minutes to talk about all of them. So, I can prepare and do more of sort of a lecture style introduction to some of the scales that are being used here. In particular, for sure, used in the like 70%. I've already talked about that recent material, so it would be really interesting to sort of give an introduction to these kinds of scale structure.
So what if I start?
We can't find anything,
And just a little bit of short background. And then about the scales, and I could jump in because I don't have these yet.
say anything in the.
And so I could just demonstrate these.
Yeah.
The scales in.
Thank you.
And then
Thank you. Sorry for shutting you down earlier.
Oh, it's good.
And then I could maybe play the other two.
Yeah, sure, that sounds good. And,
So like we sort of said, we would start, you would talk about scales, I would help by even playing some things to illustrate your points, and then we could finish with the ones.
Yeah.
Kind of like a 3 seconds.
That sounds great. And in terms of talking about the scales, I would probably want to start by talking about Phrygian dominant, and so we could use excerpts from the 2 pieces you talked about today.
Yeah, okay.
And then I would end by talking about the double harmonic scale, which Jell and Jell is a great example of. So I think that makes everything natural.
Okay, and then if we run out of time, I can just play Jill and Jill instead of the other.
Yeah, sounds perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
This is
thank you.
fun.
Yeah, it's fun. And it's always nice to have live music and new compositions in a theory class.
So I'm glad that it was interesting. at
Oh yeah,
least.
absolutely, and it fits really well with the stuff that we've talked about. Like I said, that we've discussed these exact scales towards the beginning of